So hello and a very warm welcome to all of you to What Works, What Doesn't, and Why Insights from Evaluation. And today the discussion is going to be around the findings of IED's 2024 Annual Evaluation Review. For those of you who are not very familiar with the design of the Annual Evaluation Review, what it does is that it summarizes and updates the performance trends of ADB operations, both sovereign and non-sovereign. And it is based on IED evaluations and also the validations of the self-evaluation that ADB does itself. So that's just a brief overview of what this report is about. We have about more than 40, now I can see 77 people who've joined us here. We've got a house full here too. So we should just start the discussion. And let me just call on stage Srinivas, who's a team leader of this evaluation, to give us a brief overview of the report so it sets the context for today's discussion. Srini.
Thank you, Saleha. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to present to you a brief summary. Saleha already gave a background for the AEO, what it does. So first, let's look at the findings from the operational performance. Overall, sovereign project success rate increased marginally from 67 to 68%. Notably, performance improved in energy and finance sectors and decreased in the urban and water and public sector management. Overall, non-sovereign performance remained steady at 55%. Performance improved in the financial institution projects, but declined in the infrastructure projects. Overall performance of TA operations declined from 73% to 67%. Mainly driven by implementation challenges and design issues. IED rated all 8 country programs evaluated in 2023 as successful. 2 of them borderline unsuccessful. In terms of lessons identified in the evaluation reports, these are some of the lessons. Sound project design informed by adequate analysis and robust due diligence is critical for the success of ADB's operations. Strategic use of TA to promote sector reforms or to strengthen institutional capacity can help improve results and ensure project success. Policy dialogue can help deepen understanding among executing agencies of the link between policy reforms and project performance. Establishing dedicated private equity funds with a developmental focus and narrow geographic scope can help reach smaller and frontier markets effectively. So next we look at the main findings from the country engagement analysis that the report did. So ADB's country engagement approach is aligned with MDB good practice. However, there is room for improvement to use high-quality country diagnostics and midstream learning and course correction during the implementation of the CPS. The report identified some factors that have a bearing on the country program success. There are capacity constraints in DMCs leading to implementation delays. ADB responding proactively to external shocks and reallocating support to evolving DMC needs, as has happened during the COVID. Human resources, skills, and networks of resident missions influencing the quality of country engagement. Then ADB's ability to add value through knowledge support or piloting innovative approaches. The other factor is the tailored approach to account for the specific risks in FCAS and SIDS and stronger monitoring processes for CPS implementation. Finally, quality results indicators in the CPS, which are critical for monitoring and measuring progress. So here we have some lessons identified. Customization of CPS is important to remain relevant and adapt to changing needs and context in the DMCs. Conducting thorough and regular country risk analysis is essential for the formulation and execution of the CPS, particularly in DMCs faced with high degree of fragility and vulnerability. CPS needs to be a platform where private sector development objectives and promotion of regional public goods are clearly articulated and pursued. ADB's experience in promoting regional cooperation and integration could be leveraged to foster collective action on global and regional public goods. Finally, we'll see some findings on the implementation of IED recommendations. 75% of IED recommendations were accepted and implemented by ADB in the 3-year period 2019 to 2023. 23% of IED recommendations were fully implemented compared to 47% in the previous year. 73% were either fully or largely implemented compared to 81% in the previous year. Now, the challenges for implementing action plans for recommendations are, some of them are as follows, like inadequate institutional backing or resources, communication and coordination problems among stakeholders, delays and impediments in getting started, and mismatch in scope and intent of actions. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Srini. And for those of you online and those of you here, Srini will be around if there are any questions that you want to ask in the question and answer session. And as Srini said, the special theme chapter this year was on country engagement. And we have the team leader online, Yurendra Bassinet, who's going to wave out to us if you can hear us, Yurendra. There you are. Okay, so you can ask questions of Srini and Yurendra during the session as well, designated question and answer session. Now, let's quickly look at a video that we call From the Front Lines. These are reactions from the resident missions on the evaluation report, and not surprisingly, most of them have commented on the special theme chapter, that is country engagement. So let's quickly take a look at the video from the front lines.
On the point about country engagement and the link to our CPS work, the point that is raised and highlighted in the evaluation report, I'd like to share 3 reflections, mostly looking at my experience here in the Philippines as country director. First, I think our program here in the Philippines could be a good pointer, a case study, if you like, for addressing these issues. Our program has now evolved over the last few years to the point where ADB is now a key partner on complex policy reforms and is also supporting the government on transformative mega infrastructure investments. And this evolution has happened really because of our strong country engagement at so many different levels. And here, I think I'd like to stress the importance of leveraging our country platforms or our convening influence within the countries. We've been able to move the climate agenda in the country on the back of some of this work. We've also been able to look at programming largely from an agnostic perspective, where our public sector work has helped catalyze, mobilize private sector investments, but also now we are seeing a ramping up on our private sector side because of this deliberate programming linkages that we've been able to foster. Our diagnostic work, that's the second point I'd like to make. It's important to reckon with the geopolitical uncertainties and the uneven economic recovery from COVID. We're still seeing scarring. It's important to liaise, coordinate with government, of course, but also work with development partners to make sure we are providing actionable recommendations in this very uncertain context. And lastly, I think the point about decentralization. We are continue to deal with capacity concerns, issues around complex portfolio challenges. And a lot of this has to be tackled on the front lines by the resident missions. It's important that we resource appropriately and make sure that these decentralization plans are fully effective.
day-to-day engagement with government counterpart and stakeholders, it's really at the heart of ADB countries' engagement in resident mission. But to take this to the next level, the resident mission needs more boots in the ground, international resident expert, which can build better understanding of the country context and build long-term relation with the client. This is an absolute necessity for meaningful policy dialogue and for enabling innovations. As part of this exercise, these experts need to engage in upstream studies together with stakeholders on critical issues. This is project originations. It takes time and resources, but it's the only way to design tailor-made strategy which are moving away from the blueprint approach. And of course, these studies need to be initiated during the CPS implementation and inform the preparation of the next CPS as well as pipeline building.
As highlighted in the annual evaluation review, for ADB, its Country Partnership Strategy, or CPS, is the key platform for country engagement and for ensuring that development assistance is aligned with and responsive to clients' needs. Over the past 5 years, Uzbekistan has undertaken extensive reforms and has adjusted its priorities and needs significantly. Both the CPS final review, led by the country team, and IED's validation of the previous CPS have helped us understand what has worked and what can be done better. The evaluations gave us valuable insights on how to respond to clients' evolving needs and to be prepared for potential shocks in the future. The collaboration between the country team with understanding of the country context and the IED with regional and global perspectives have together greatly enhanced the upcoming CPS for Uzbekistan.
Right. So the last one was a good example of IED evaluations being influential. Now, let me quickly introduce you to the panelists and request all of you to walk up and take your seats as I call your name. First of all, Lu Shen, Director, Results and Aid Effectiveness, Process Division, SPD. Leah Gutierrez, Director General, PARD. And Ambassador and US Executive Director, Chantale Wong. And today's discussion is going to be moderated by Director General of Independent Evaluation Department, Manny Jimenez. It's over to you now, Manny.
Thanks very much, Saleha. And I want to thank my panelists who are a very distinguished group to address some of the questions that I'm sure all of you have about the performance of ADB in the last year, which the AER tries to summarize. The AER, as Srini mentioned, not only just reviews what went on in the past year, but also took a deep dive at the country engagements and how ADB does those over a much longer time period. And we have a panel that can address these questions as well as the implementation challenges of taking into account the actions as a result of IED recommendations. Lou, if I could first turn to you from SPD and the oversight you have there on results. The AER, as Srini mentioned, really was consistent with the DEFR that your group prepares about the need for strengthening project design and implementation, which are key to improving outcomes. Can you just go over what initiatives ADB is considering as it continues to address these difficult challenges?
Thank you, Manny. And as you know, we work very closely every year to make sure that we look at the project performance and success rates for completed projects. And this is one of the areas that we constantly are looking at and trying to improve year on year. Just a distinction, because outcomes we also measure, right? And project outcomes often, most of the times, as you can see from our DFR, we actually do pretty well in delivering the development outcomes, right, for projects. And this is the 99 indicators that we talk about for the outcome orientation. But the key is that how well do we do those? How well do we deliver the development impact? And this is where the success rates and the project performance comes in really, really crucially, right? And so in terms of what we're doing from the top, and you're right, SPD, especially our division, is looking at the corporate results framework. And we are developing the new results framework for 2025 to 2030 this year. One of the biggest areas is really looking at the project preparation, number one, and really, aside from procurement readiness and design readiness, I think we want to broaden the scope, and we've been working very closely with PPFD on this point on what does it mean for project readiness, right? And we think it's broader than that. There's institutional aspects, there's the other financial management and other aspects that we have to be thinking about during the project preparation. And then it comes the hard work of project implementation, as we all know, takes a lot more time, but it's really for me, it's a key in ensuring that the project success at the end of the day. So what are we doing in terms of helping the project teams do that better? Number one, there's the soft ops, which is ongoing right now. And I think, when you're looking at what is the objective of the soft ops development, that's really the end-to-end project, right, cycle at a single, at kind of a single sign-on, right? And so you can actually look at project preparation all the way down to the implementation and get real-time data, which will help you do the course corrections that you need. And I think this will be, when it's done, it will be an incredibly helpful tool to help the project teams, right? So that's two. And then three, and I think Pavan was talking about decentralization and country engagement. And I think having that presence in the country, it's something that is incredibly, incredibly key, right? Getting people on the ground who understands the circumstances, who understands the projects at the ground level to resolve issues. And so having the right people there, and that's the spirit of the new operating model, is to have that be the kind of the status quo, right, for the organization. Last but certainly not the least, and this is I think it's one of the more important points, is about incentives, but not what we said in the corporate results framework. Rather, this is about rewards and recognition, right? So what HR can do to help in putting more emphasis on implementation. Because if you get rewarded for only preparation, then people won't pay attention to implementation. So if you actually change that dynamic and say, hey, we're going to reward you for the harder work, then perhaps that will work better. And I think that's something that we have to work as a system. Thanks.
So thank you very much. We'll get back to some of the important questions you raised, especially on this incentives issue and also the corporate results framework and what role that would play. But I want to ask Leah on another point you raised about decentralization and the importance of that in making sure that we have presence on the ground. Leah, you are the ground, so to speak, as regional DG, and the report finds that, as Pavan and others also mentioned, that country diagnostics is really an important part of how we prepare our CPSs, and also how we learn in midstream. And I was wondering if you could comment from your perch as a regional DG on some of these important issues that we're really taking to address these concerns.
Thanks very much, Manny, and thank you very much for the well-prepared AER and the lessons learned and the recommendations. So we're taking it to heart, and I must say that indeed, country diagnostics. As you know, if you've been in ADB long enough, we were doing a lot of country diagnostics in preparation for CPSs earlier, and then after that, we kind of like streamlined it. And actually, along the way, during when it was streamlined, we ourselves learned that we needed to do more because we ourselves had a lot of questions. And even though that the CPS process or the CPS template did not require certain assessments to be attached, we ourselves, for our own information, had to undertake those. So it may not be publicly available, but we ourselves thought that it was important to do so. And one thing that we have to make sure during country preparation is that there's sufficient resources. The reform that we had on CPS preparation earlier was partly because of the fact that the country preparation, the CPS preparation costs were really going up and up and up. It was really getting up there. So that was behind the rethinking of the process. However, there are now much better ways for us to do those country diagnostics. As you know, over time, with more people being recruited, we had more specialists coming in. And now with NOM, country teams have actually come together, and they are now a very important, they're key, in fact, to the CPS process. Every sector represented is actually a contributor these days to a CPS process. And now come implementation of the CPS, as you said, Manny, mid-course correction. For us, it's not mid-course correction. It's actually being agile to adapt to the changing circumstances and environments and changing priorities and needs in country. We cannot really wait for midterm. If, let's say, there's a change in government within a year, hey, we'd better respond to that, because chances are there may potentially be adjustments in priorities, and we have to really adapt to it. So it's key for us to be very agile, to be listening, and to be responding quickly. Okay. And I would like to say that with more people in the country teams these days, we're able to do that because we get the inputs from everyone much faster. Everyone is now around the table, and so I'm expecting um, faster responses.
Great. Now, just a quick follow-up on this point and relating back to Lou's point on decentralization. I mean, agility must require boots on the ground, as you all mentioned, but it must be incredibly hard, especially in the Pacific, because you have so much, not just ground, but ocean to cover. What are the plans for making sure that we have those boots or fins out there to respond with the agility that we're seeking?
Yeah, I cannot. I think we cannot emphasize enough the importance of having boots on the ground. And in fact, this is what this was the key for us in delivering assistance during the COVID period. Believe it or not, ADB is the only MDB that actually has presence in all of our 14 Pacific members. Yes, we're the only MDB. We even have someone representing us, coordinating for us in Niue. Okay? Our latest member and smallest member, we have someone there. Okay? So over the years, thanks to BPMSD and to our donors, Australia and New Zealand, we have been able to actually bring more people into the Pacific. We were able to recruit very high caliber, high quality Pacific nationals. If you go right now to any of our Pacific offices, believe me, we've got very strong representation there. Okay, so I encourage you to come to the Pacific. Moving forward, of course, I'm just going to I'm going to look at our board members here. Please we're requesting for your support.
Okay, great.
Thank
No,
you.
thanks. We'll try to do with fewer advertisements, but uh, uh, let's turn now to Chantal. And I did have, I want to ask you two questions. One is if you could opine on your favorite topic, one of your favorite topics, which is on the role of diagnostics. And both Leah, but also Lou stressed how we really need to do more. And from your, I know outside of ADB experience, what are those diagnostics that you'd like to see more of here in the ADB to really address these questions? And then I want to get to my other question on implementing IED recommendations. But first on this.
No, thank you. Thank you for actually inviting me to this. I did, I marked up the chapter quite a bit. So I've taken a lot of the recommendations and the diagnostics that you did in terms of the CPS. I was really struck by the World Bank. You know, you did an analysis of who's doing what. I was really struck by the World Bank group. They have 5 different types of assessments here in terms of diagnostics, and I don't know how that compares to what we do here, but yes, my favorite topic is diagnostics. And I think in terms of the country strategy, partner strategy, CPS, it really needs to be girded around good diagnostics. And I would say that diagnostics around it would be looking at what are the binding constraints to economic growth, not only just binding constraints to regular economic growth, but really what is the binding constraints to private sector led economic growth. That kind of analysis really needs to drive what we do in terms of how we engage the countries. And these diagnostics, by the way, needs to be done with stakeholder engagement as well, so that governments as well as civil society and others, including the business sector, the public-private sectors, all needs to be part of these engagements, the NGO sector. And so then we have a better sense of what the country's challenges are in particular within the CPS period, and a diagnostic around women in the economy as well. So I think we need to spend a lot more time around that, and the climate and the global public good challenges. And with that good sense of diagnostic, which by the way, we've seen some good examples more recently. I think the Georgia CPS had a very good set of diagnostics that we were able to see. So kudos to the work around that. But it also needs to be linked directly to some sort of a results framework around the CPS. What are we trying to achieve given those things that are brought up through the diagnostics, right? And so we have to have a theory of change around that CPS period, and then metrics that we can be asked to measure around it and monitor around. And given sort of, yes, agility, the changing circumstances that are going to be happening, but you know, even political changes that should be factored into the diagnostics as well, to understand if there is going to be a change in government coming up. We see that already, should be baked into this work, and then measuring, be able to have to be able to measure progress. I really like what you talked about. Rather, what we've been doing is the ex post look at things rather than looking at it through an ex ante lens. So, but you talked about in here about that there's a sector compilation of when it's completed, and it's rather than an integrated look. And I think if we focus on the CPS on a country level, it should be more integrated. I have quite a few others. Can I go on?
Well, maybe we can get back to that after we hear some reactions actually from our operational colleagues. I mean, ED Chantale mentioned the need to make sure that the diagnostics address binding constraints and also to make sure that we address integration because across sectors, sovereign, non-sovereign. I was wondering, Lou, if you felt that since Georgia actually was something that I think you once at least someone in your group actually helped in as a good example.
Now, a good example of diagnostics, but linking it to
Well, and I want to get to, it's exactly what I wanted to,
CPS.
to ask Lou is, what are things that you could make, you think ADB could do to make sure that those good diagnostics actually translate into the actions and the theory of change that Chantale mentioned for the ADB?
In terms of the CPS and yeah.
The other things that we do in terms of the program planning and actually carrying it out.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, the CPS is a really good tool because, you know, we talk about cascading a lot of the times, and the CRF is supposed to be cascading down to the CPSs, which is supposed to be cascading down to the project level, right? And so in terms of linking the diagnostics to the programming, to the results framework, I think there's still a lot of work that remains to be done because like Chantale says, I mean, there's this whole idea about ex ante versus ex post. And when you're looking at the CPS period and what we actually program and the alignment to the diagnostics, that is one of the cycles that should be reflected in the results framework. And yet, because of the evidence-based way that we look at results frameworks, there is this massive time lag, right, between what we measure for a given CPS period, right, in terms of results, versus what is the intention of that CPS to achieve expected results. I think this is like something that we struggle with all the time, right? Because conceptually, it's kind of a mind bender, right? It's like you're, on the one hand, you're forward looking because CPS is about planning. And yet the results framework, it's more about what you're looking at completed operations plus everything that's in the pipeline, right? And then when we go into validation for IED, it's that you're validating CPSs in that specific period where when you're looking where you're supposed, what I think, right, you're supposed to look at is over a period of CPSs, whether results are being delivered. If that makes any sense.
No, thanks.
Even in that particular CPS, if we have a theory of change around that CPS and results to measure them periodically, given understanding some agility and need to do midstream or midterm reviews around it, but there should be, you know, some sort of a analytical framework around whether we're delivering as we're going along within the CPS period.
Leah, please, on this, but also if you could comment on, I think what Lou was alluding to is that it's very hard to hit a moving target and that there's a lot more risk involved, especially perhaps in your region and how we can handle that.
Okay, so first on CPS. Okay, CPS results and all. I agree. I mean that theory of change, and we should be able to capture all of that in our program. Now, however, when we take a look at the CPS, when we evaluate the CPS at the end of the day, and we take a look at the completed projects and all that, which is part of the assessment, we're actually looking at the CPS that was at the results of a CPS that were prepared 2 CPSs ago. So there's a time inconsistency in a way in the CPS that would report that the CPS, the CPS final review that we're doing right now is not actually for the CPS that's about to be completed. It's actually a review of a CPS from 2 CPSs ago. If we keep continuing to evaluate, to assess a CPS per the completed projects. But if we assess the current CPS based on the pipeline of projects that were actually indicated in that CPS period, then I think we're in a better footing. I think that's something, because this is something that really has been for over a decade for me. It's like, how can we actually improve this? And so for me, we should not be looking per se at the projects that are being complete that have been completed, but actually on the pipeline. So there's time consistency.
But can I push on this a little bit? Clearly, one aspect of ADB's country engagement is how we implement the CPS, and whether it was 3 CPS ago or this one. But the country engagement of ADB in implementing the CPS is going to be key, and it's also how we do it and the kind of policy dialogue that's ongoing. And also, if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Now, the question is, how do we capture that? How do we measure? How do we capture that in a CPS final review? That's qualitative. So how will you, so that we can write about the process. We can definitely write about the process, and that can be validated by interviews with relevant stakeholders and our counterparts.
Okay, Lou?
And just to add, I think, going back to Chantale's point about linking the diagnostics to the pipeline, that is really supposed to be the evidence and the theory of change, right? Also on sort of expected results. This is something that we should be discussing more with IED, right? Because part of the funny thing is that sometimes we do things because we want to make, the validation like a good one, because then we can like demonstrate that our CPSs are successful.
Incentives, we
like
know about
totally
the
different
incentives.
right? But I think we have an opportunity, right? In terms of the development impact work that is ongoing. I think that could also make some changes, because in terms of how do we think about development impact, how does this actually translate down, well, from CRF down to the country programming, down to the, project level, without making it kind of a checklist, but rather a thinking tool in thinking about how do we measure impact and how do we evidence impact, right?
And we need to spend a lot more time and money on impact evaluation.
Yeah, monitoring evaluation.
Monitoring M&E, but also impact, because impact also drives lessons backwards, right? So I don't think we spend enough time or effort. But impact evaluation doesn't, it also is a time lag, but it's huge. You gotta have project closure before you could actually do impact, years later, 5, 6 years later, or 10 years later.
So we're going to continue this conversation, but I wanted to warn the audience, if you have questions after another few minutes or so of this spirited debate, we will turn to you for questions. Also, those online, please prepare them. One of the things that ED Chantale mentioned was this, in our country engagement, that we need to have an integrated approach, not just on the sovereign side, but sovereign and non-sovereign. And I was wondering, Leah, if you could comment, especially in the challenging environment of the Pacific, what are things that can be done to make sure that we are delivering that one ADB approach?
Pacific on private sector. Okay. First of all, I would like to say that in the Pacific, we've already on the policy side, there's a lot that's going on, and that's partly because of a large initiative that's called the Private Sector Development Initiative, which is funded by Australia, New Zealand, and ADB. And this really has been impactful in terms of preparing policies, and which we were able to follow through with policy-based budget support. And so a lot of that has been going on. However, despite that, we still see very few private sector or non-sovereign transactions in the Pacific. And that's partly because of the challenge, because of the challenges that are facing the Pacific, first and foremost, those are very small markets. So the profits to be made may not be that much. And then, of course, the isolation. So all of those challenges. Now, however, when we do our operations, we do think holistically on what can be done. And in the bigger countries, we do have examples. So for example, in PNG right now, I don't know if you guys, if you know, but we are actually active in the civil aviation area in PNG. So we're doing airstrips, we're upgrading airstrips or constructing airstrips, also some upgrades of airports. So we're active in that area. Now, at the same time, we know the issues. Through that engagement, we learn, we got a better understanding of the issues in the aviation sector. And so we know that certain upgrades need to be done in the main international airport. And we're also in discussions through our OMDP for that one to help them. And let's see how that develops. And then at the same time, given that our counterparts in the government have seen that we really are very involved in civil aviation, and looking at the Fiji Air transaction also, they also approach us for a non-sovereign transaction for Air New Guinea. And so this is something that we are discussing right now. So it's really a very integrated aviation support, both from the soft side, both projects, and there's actually, of course, some policy associated with that, and then in the non-sovereign side.
Oh, great. No, thanks. Those are nice examples. I wonder, Lou, if I could turn to you, especially on how we capture this integration in the corporate results frameworks that we're developing.
That's a hard question. Just so the audience know, like Manny just went yes. So for those online who couldn't see, I think in terms of integration, it's more about kind of looking at the way that we can incentivize the way that we represent private sector development, right? And the way that we can emphasize on climate change. Both are really, really essential areas, no matter where you look at from the ADB's perspective. And so from that point of view, setting the incentives, right, in terms of what do we mean by private sector development, you know, considering that there is a differentiated approach to sort of look at, okay, is it quantity, right? Is it more the quality of the interventions, and how do we represent that well? So I think these are the kind of things that we're thinking very much about in CRF, in the corporate results framework. In terms of climate financing, the same kind of thing, right? Like, are we really focusing on the things that are mainstreamed, or are we focusing on issues that are becoming more challenging, like biodiversity or environmental sustainability? So those are the kind of things that we're trying to think a little bit more about in terms of driving the behaviors at the operations level.
Okay. Very quickly, because I want to turn to the audience.
Just very quickly, what I've just demonstrated in PNG is actually based on showing good work over the years. Now, however, from a programming perspective, integration can actually be faster. Let's say, for example, our work in renewable energy. So, in the sovereign sector, we do the transmission and distribution and the battery. This is actually to one is to the battery helps attract IPPs, and our OMDP has actually provided transaction services for potential IPPs. So we can facilitate the entry of the private sector. Our OMDP arm, our OMDP colleagues can do the transaction advisory service. So this is actually something that we think about, in fact, when we're doing renewable energy. Thank you.
Great. No, thanks. We'll turn to the audience for a second. And so I want to turn to see whether there are any questions. ED Justine.
Thank you so much. First, I want to congratulate IED and the team leader Srini for this excellent report we discussed on deck, and also this impressive panel. Actually, I was very interested in what you were talking about with respect to country partnership strategy and evaluating across the different country partnership strategies. My question was, when we were discussing the upcoming evaluation of country assistance, how would you be able to determine, do you have any ideas, how would you be able to determine if there was in fact progress? Would it be because the needs change across the different country partnership strategies? Or like if the need still remains the same, does it mean that there wasn't much progress in that? Or could it be because of changing needs? So how would you be able, that's more of an intellectual exercise. How would you be able to determine if there was in fact development or progress in, let's say, certain sectors? What if it's been there for 3 CPSs? Does that mean it hasn't? Or is it because something has changed? Or, if there are new needs that are emerging? So thank you.
So you have to share the microphone.
Or development is just hard,
Okay.
right?
They took away my mic, so. But I mean, we go back to that, results framework, the theory of change to really understand whether we are making progress in monitoring of that. And so there has to be evidence based conversation around this, right?
If I may quickly, our involvement, having a sector being there from one CPS to another is not an indicator of any failure. In fact, it would be great for us to be there throughout the several CPSs because it evolves. So in the beginning, we may be looking at some basic policies and basic investments, but then it evolves. So let's say in PFM, you do some basic work, and then later down the road, it would be something much more advanced. So, and in fact, that particular continuity is very important in maintaining the policy dialogue and that particular trust relationship for them, for us together to actually carry out some more bolder reforms down the road. Thanks.
So the question is, are we able to document these kinds of things?
Normally, this is captured in the sector assessments that we undertake. And then kind of like a capsule of that is in the sector, in the shorter sector assessments in the appendices of RRPs, in the linked documents.
Okay.
So I was trying to had a complete blurry moment, but the CAPES that are measuring kind of the longer term CPS performance, I think those are really useful tools to give that kind of the trend analysis or assessment of how CPSs do over time. The other thing I think, going back to Chantale, in terms of looking at impact and studying things over even a longer period of time, our division actually did a study for Kyrgyzstan in the education sector to look at a 20-year period of how our intervention actually have any kind of correlation to changes in that sector. I think those are kind of the studies that provides evidence, right? And we should do more of those.
Yeah, Chantale, please.
Going back,
Just before you do that, CAPES are country assistance program evaluations, which are not validations just of the past CPS, but takes a deep dive over a 10-year period or so. Sorry, Chantale, please.
Can I go back to the integration question again? It's really, so my example, my factoid that I'm looking at is that I was in Singapore 3 weeks ago, where we brought it's the IPEF Investor Clean Economy Investor Forum. We brought so much money investors to the table. There's a lot of money out there that want to invest, but the whole thing they keep talking about is that the enabling environment is not there. So the question I have is, are we when we're looking at these interventions, it's not really a PSOD specific look at this, that it needs to be integrated across the institution around what are the opportunities upstream, midstream, and all that. So we really need to, and whether the NAM has really brought us into a place where we can have those analysis and diagnostics and able to do the policy interventions up front so that private sector can come in.
Okay, so thanks. We have two more questions. We have time for two or three, but let me take a group of questions and then turn back to the panel. So please identify yourself and ask your question quickly, and also identify the person whom you want to respond.
Thank you, Manny. Hans Waldring, IED. Layup. Good project origination comes from a deeper diagnostic work than is traditionally done for sector analysis that supports a CPS. And so in the era of reduced TA resources, are you able to get enough funds to actually do that deeper diagnostic work, which can then support quality project origination down the track? Lou, question for you. Sorry, I'm going to take the microphone. Yes, you can't.
You have one more question, Hans, and that's it.
Thank you,
Okay,
Lou. Lou, I keep doing these project validations, right? And constantly we have problems identifying attribution to outcomes from the project that we're looking at, that we're validating. It's an ongoing problem. It's a problem because there's inadequate M&E set up at the beginning. It's, you know,
Hans,
when I was,
ask the question.
thank you. When I was with IFC, we used to have monitoring and evaluation specialists help at the project design stage. What's SPD stance? What are you doing to overcome that problem? Thank you, Manny.
Yeah, thank you. One more question here.
Hi, thank you for the very engaging and enlightening panel. I'm an intern at IED. I have two quick questions. I'll keep them short. These are for Director Lu Shen and DG Manny. So my first question is, I know ERDI is quite a recent department focused on impact evaluations. I'm interested in what you think will be the strategic kind of collaboration between ERDI's role and the operations team, and how they can be more involved in actually focusing on the impact at the project design stage. And the second question is on, for results framework, we understand that it's important to monitor different indicators, but there are sometimes more kind of larger structural progress made that is hard to quantify. So on that end, how can we also prevent perverse incentives of projects focusing on quantifiable low-hanging fruit, so to say, rather than broader, more structural changes that can be hard to quantify in a results framework? Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So, well, we're running out of time, and I want to give each of you a chance. I think there were questions addressed to each of you.
There were no questions for me, so
I think there were, but I will turn to you in a second. But first, Leah.
Okay. Yes. For TA, we have TA, and we're trying to use our TAs efficiently and effectively. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so for monitoring evaluation, this is like a constant battle, right? Because unless teams feel the need and the relevance, they're not going to pay attention to it because they have too many things that's being asked of them, right? And so the main question is, how do you get teams to really appreciate why we do the things that we do? And this is the whole thing about development impact. And this kind of relates to the second question as well. I think that's really a very good opportunity for us to really think about, right? What is it that we're trying to do as an institution, and how can we make people care about why we're doing the things that we do? DMFs are not just an appendix for, a project document. And yet most people will be like, okay, we need to get this done. Let's get it done. It's a thinking tool. Development impact, it's not going to be any different. And so this is something that we're working very closely with ERDI on. And there are other pieces on impact evaluations, which is a very, very different story, right? But on the development impact, something that we're working very closely with them on to share the lessons, et cetera. I know Manny was trying to grab the mic from me.
Yes, I'm moderating. Chantale, any last words from you, especially on this point about development impact and the role of economic research in this? And I know that sometimes economic research is seen as an ivory tower in some of our institutions, and we're really trying to bring them in. From your experience, globally in other organizations? How do we make sure that there's that integration between the knowledge side and our operational side?
That is critical. I would say the economic analysis, and by the way, we've done some of that, at joint. And I always go back to my experience at MCC, where we do have a much more integrated analytical framework around this diagnostic between the economists. In fact, economists all lead those country diagnostic work, and I think we do too. The country economists do here, but yeah, can I go back to there is a pet peeve of mine more recently, is that in the name of streamlining and the business process reforms, we're actually leaving some assessments and diagnostics on the cutting floor, and I have some key concerns around that, especially around the poverty and social assessment place. So very concerned about all of that.
Huge issue
analysis.
for which unfortunately we don't have time to discuss at this stage, but we will have other opportunities in future what works for many pet peeves that are of interest to everybody. But please join me in thanking our great panel for a really interesting conversation.